In this video, we're going to be working with Canon's 5D Mark IV once again, and once again working with the autofocus system, which is pretty capable but quite complex. This particular episode will deal with focus priorities and setting up those parameters on the 5D Mark IV. Canon have grouped the settings that deal with focus priority in one part of the 5D Mark IV menu. So in order to get there, we hit the menu button, and then I can use the Q button to navigate to the autofocus menu, which is this pink or purple one, and then just use the front dial. And you can see second tab when you're working with Servo, which is the moving subject focus mode. We get to this screen. So it says AI Servo first image priority or AI Servo second image priority. To understand this perhaps a little better, because it's not really that clear from the names in the menu system here, I'm going to just push set to go in, and then you can see I get a little slider on the back screen here, which has got release on the left side and focus on the right side, and I can move to the right or left with the joystick. I need to push the set button to lock in my choice. So when we are using Servo and we are keeping either the shutter button halfway down or the AF on button, if you use back button focus, depressed, the camera is trying to focus between every single frame that it takes. What this screen and parameter allows us to do is to control how much time is given over for autofocus to happen between each frame or before the first frame is fired in a burst. So looking again at the slider, if I move the little pointer over to the far right, the option that's named there is focus. So obviously everybody wants their photos to be focused, but what it really means is that you are maximizing how much time is allowed for focusing to happen before the 5D Mark IV will actually trigger the shutter. And it may even require a confirmation in the camera's processing before the shutter trips. If you move that setting onto the far left, the description is release, and really what that means is that the amount of time given over for focusing to happen when we are shooting Servo and we're tracking moving subjects is limited. So there's a certain amount of time available on this camera which can shoot at 7 frames a second, and in between those 7 frames, those are the little blocks of time that is then given over for focusing to happen before the shutter will be released. So if you have your 5D Mark IV set on release, the camera will trip the shutter whether it's confirmed focus or not, but it will then continue on to try and focus for the next frame, and it will also keep trying to focus between every frame that you take. If you choose release, it doesn't mean that there's no focusing happening. It doesn't mean that the camera only tries to focus on the first frame in a burst. It means that there's a limited amount of time for focusing to happen, but it does still happen. This particular screen deals with the first image in a burst. If we go back into the menu setting, we can see there's a second one which says AI Servo second image priority. So what does that show us? So a similar set of options again, but instead of the word release being used on the left side of the slider, Canon now use the word speed, which is a little confusing, but basically it means the same thing as on the menu that we looked at earlier. So with this slider, there's an extra step along the way. So you have 0, which is a equal balance between focus and speed, and then we have an intermediate step towards focus and an intermediate step towards speed. The intermediate steps are new in the 5D range. They were previously only found on the 1DX series cameras. What this deals with though is the second image. So here Canon are referring to a burst. So when you trip the shutter and you shoot a series of frames, they allow us to make an adjustment on timing of the focus for the first image in the screen that we looked at, and then for the second image onwards. So as long as you hold your finger on the shutter, that counts as a second image onward in that burst. So all that the two screens do, first image and second image, is allow us to control the timing of the first image that starts off the burst, and then the second image and onwards in that same burst. Allow us to have two different amounts of time given, or the same if we should so choose. In order to get a better idea of what these settings actually do, let's try them out. So I'm going to put my first image priority to focus, push OK, and then I'm going to go down to the second one, and we're going to select focus as well. So both our first image and the second image are now set to focus as a priority. So maximum time taken between frames, and the camera needs to confirm between the frames before it will allow me to trip the shutter, even though I'm pushing down the shutter button. I'm now going to actually shoot my camera, which is also set in continuous high speed mode, and just take a listen to how fast the frame rate is. Okay, so I was moving the camera around slightly just to simulate a moving subject, and you could hear a very, very slow rate of capture. So because the camera is asking for that confirmation, and because it wants that focus lock before it will allow either the first shot or the subsequent frames to be fired, it can lead to a very slow frame rate. If you're shooting something that is dead still, so now I'm not going to move the camera, I'm going to attempt the same series, you can see that without changing any settings, it's very easy for focus to be confirmed when the subject's not moving. So if you find you prefer to shoot your 5D Mark IV with focus priority enabled, be aware that speed of motion of your subject or difficult backgrounds for autofocus to function in can cause the frame rate to slow right down. On the other hand, I'm going to go in and change those settings around. Let's take it all the way to release, and we'll put the second image all the way to speed, which is basically the same thing. So now I'm telling my 5D Mark IV that regardless of whether focus is confirmed or not, for the first frame and for the subsequent frames that follow, keep shooting, keep trying to focus between each frame. So we'll just try to do the same thing where I'm moving and shooting at the same time. So you can hear straight away that frame rate slows slightly as the camera is trying to focus between one or two of those frames, but it shoots nice and rapidly. Obviously, if I use this setting on a static subject, it's going to shoot at 7 frames a second if I kept the trigger down. Now that we've seen the difference that the image priority, the first and second image priority settings make to the behavior and the timing of the focus, we can think about what we want with our own cameras. So I don't set my 5D Mark IV perhaps exactly the same as to with this setting as I would with 1DX or 1DX Mark II, or perhaps even the 7D Mark II. It comes down to your own personal preferences and also the results that you achieve. So I've found for myself that I prefer to get my first shot off quickly, so I don't want the camera to lag or pause in any way when I pick it up. So for first image, I always set to release as my option, and then for second image I may choose 0 as the priority on a 5D Mark IV, or -1 or -2, depending on how fast my subjects are going, or depending on the performance of the camera. If I feel the camera lagging, then I may make it faster. If I've got it in the middle, which should give me a little more focus accuracy, and I find that it's still a little bit sluggish and most of the photos are properly focused, then I'll go a little faster. But overall, 7 frames a second is not that high a frame rate for a modern camera. So what that means is that it leaves quite a lot of time for focusing to happen between each frame. So that's why I tend to keep my 5D Mark IV over towards the speed side of settings. The autofocus is so good on the camera that it's not like by choosing speed or by choosing release, I'm ending up with a lot of photos out of focus, any more than I would expect with any of the other high-end Canon bodies. In the next video on Canon 5D Mark IV's autofocus system, we're going to do our best to demystify the AF cases. So see you then. Subscribe to this channel if you want to keep getting videos about Canon gear from a wildlife photographer's perspective.